FM UK. On this episode of The Stream, we are going to be joined by Nikesh Shukla, British writer and author of a brand new book called Brown Baby, a memoir of race, family and home. Hello, Nikesh. So great to have you on The Stream. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very well. You know, I was seeing you talk about your memoir on various different social media platforms and you were excited and you were anxious. What was making you anxious before its publishing date? I felt like you were almost like biting your nails before it came out.
Yeah, a bunch of things. I mean, given I'm a fiction writer, it's so hard to know how things are going to be received, but also I'm a writer who always puts myself on the page as much as I can, and I really like to bleed on the page. But with fiction, you can always hide behind the fact that it's fiction, and with a memoir, you can't really hide. And so I'm dealing with some really, really big things. I'm dealing with some really, really truthful and hard things to deal with. And once the book comes out, it doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs to readers. And so knowing that it's going to come out and people are going to talk about it, they're going to talk about you, they're going to talk about your life, and they're going to project things onto it that you might not necessarily see, and that's weird. It's quite overwhelming to deal with. I'm not the most like extroverted person in the world. I just sort of sit here in my little garret and do my thing. So it's out, so
feels,
I can move on to the next
thing. So now it's unleashed, and now you're getting the feedback. So it feels the publishing date, like February 2021. So it's out right now. So we are in a global pandemic. We are post Brexit. We're in a time when the anti-racism movement is almost got like reinvigorated. It's got this new life into it. And your memoir is very personal, but somehow it addresses all of these moments that we're in right now. It feels very prescient to me. How does it feel to you about this timing for it to come out?
Yeah, God. But I guess so much of what's in it very evergreen, right? And because I'm it as a letter to my daughters about the way the world is, and so much of the the memoir is themed around how to find joy in times of difficulty when the world feels so bleak and I feel so sad and angry about it. And all those things that I'm talking about, whether it's racism, whether it's the patriarchy, whether it's climate catastrophe or mental health or grief or any of these things, they just seem to be evergreen. We are in a global pandemic where we're thinking about ways in which we can sort of change the way we live, and it is ultimately a very hopeful book. And there are lots of people with their anti-racism reading lists next to their bedside, which I hope they're getting through those books. It'd be nice for people to hurry up and finish those books and join the anti-racism movements. And and also, so like none of these things feel prescient for me because they feel quite evergreen in a way.
I am not going to be the only person who will be asking you questions and chatting back and forth with you, Nikesh. We have a YouTube stream on right now. People can jump into the comment section and ask Nikesh whatever you want to know about his writing and his work. And we're going to start the questions with a writer who knows your work and you know his work. And he has this question for you, Nikesh. Have a listen.
As father of a brown baby myself, this book will become my go-to for the many lessons of wisdom and joy, and most important, the love that you share with us. It reminded me of so much of being at a majority white school and the daily barbs and jokes about the skin colour and the curry, and how difficult it was to traverse that, especially as you couldn't take it home because your family had their own problems. So I guess it's already hard enough to feel other in this life, in your friendship groups, in publishing, and at university. And so I guess my question is, when you write about family, there's sometimes a feeling of being other there also. So do you expect some fallout there, and how do you deal with writing your life on the page now as an older, wiser writer?
God, Irfan Master, what an amazing writer he is. Thank you, Irfan. One of the things that I said to people in my family, buy many copies of this book, but do not read this book. Mostly because it's just very raw about my grief for my mum and my mum's passing. I don't think I say anything in there that I wouldn't say to anyone's face or haven't said over the years. But it is very raw when it's all in one place, and so yeah, there'll be things in there that probably shouldn't make public. But the thing about writing in this space is you have to write your truth. You have to write from an emotional truth. That's what memoir is, and so much of that emotional truth gets wrapped up in perspective and what your perspective is at the time that you're experiencing the thing that you are narrating years later. And I've tried to be as truthful to that perspective as I can. And
Just
the
looking
second
at
thing that Irfan,
yeah, I am
and the
just
second
looking at
thing,
a picture. Oh, sorry, Nikesh, go ahead. What was the second thing? As I share a picture of you and your family, that was about 20 years ago. Go ahead,
yeah,
Nikesh.
God,
What was the second thing?
oh no, Irfan asked. I've forgotten Irfan's second question. I got so so confused by
So
seeing my younger self.
here are a couple of things that I was thinking about that you shared about your family, and one was as an immigrant family growing up in the UK, there were some very distinctive gender roles. Your mum did some certain things, your dad did certain things, and that has an impact on you as you grow up. And you lost your mum from cancer, and then your dad, he's a good businessman, but he wasn't necessarily good in terms of reading bedtime stories, giving you cuddles, which you love, that sort of thing. How does that impact you as a young man and then as an older man writing about it?
Yeah, sure. I think I just didn't understand my dad when I was younger. I didn't understand that was from a position of vulnerability. It was a stoicism, but it was a position of vulnerability. And actually, my dad, since my mum has passed, is he's very in touch with his feelings now. He is constantly talking about how he feels, and he is constantly thinking about his place in the world. And I really love that about him. And I don't, but the relationship I have with him now for anything. And sure, it would have been. Oops, sorry, it would have been nice to have had that as a teenager. But that's just not the way the world was. And so I can't go back and change things. I think what I wanted to do in this book is create a space for men, for fathers, for men of color, to show their vulnerable side, to be vulnerable, to be soft, to be fallible, to make mistakes, to learn, to listen, to step back when needed to. And because I'm far from perfect. None of us are perfect. And I think often you need someone to sort of start. You need someone to kind of create space for other people to kind of congregate around. So I really hope that it makes more men think about their place in the world, and also allowing their vulnerability to be more visible.
I'm going to play you some thoughts from Maeve Higgins, who's a friend of the stream. She's also a writer as well. And she wants to ask you this.
I really enjoyed the book. I loved all of the quality of the writing, and I loved all the food mentions and the way food plays into our emotions and our families and our memories. My question is really about how to preserve joy. I mean, in the depths of grief, and also just as a parent, how you manage to kind of raise your girls with joy and also infuse your writing with joy even when things are difficult.
Oh, I love Maeve. Maeve contributed to the Good Immigrant USA, which was a real treat for us because she's such an amazing writer. Yeah, the main thing that's running through the book is how how thinking about joy, thinking about boundlessness, thinking about making sure the world feels limitless and expansive, but at the same time my kids are realistic about what to expect. And it's a very hard thing to do. I have found that being present, whether it's with my kids or in the writing, is the thing that's really helping me to find joy, and also like not projecting my cynicism and my jadedness onto my children, but instead being present in how they see the world and trying to explain the world to them as they see it, rather than explaining the world to them as a world weary person in their 40s might experience it. It's been a really, really big learning lesson for me, because it's so easy to just default to, well, the world is this way because. To kind of give you an example of this, my daughter wanted to know about the Bristol Bus Boycott, which was a big civil rights event in Bristol where we live in the 60s. And when I was explained to her, I realized I had to tell her what racism was, which is a strange thing to have to explain. And so when I explained to her what racism was, her reaction was, "That's stupid. That doesn't make any sense to me." And I immediately was like, well, no, well, maybe people might be racist because, and then I had to stop myself and go, hold on a minute. You're being intellectually dishonest with her by trying to justify why someone might be racist in order to illustrate why racism exists. Actually, what you need to do is talk with her on her level. And yes, racism is incredibly stupid. It's an incredibly pathetic thing. And that was a really big lesson. Yes.
Yeah, Nikesh, there's a little bit of in your book. There's actually a lot in your book where you talk about brownness and skin tone, and I want to share this with our audience. And this is where you talk about brown. I'm just going to show a little clip for everybody, a little excerpt. It's a consistent thing you said throughout your entire childhood was that you didn't like the color brown. You're talking about your little girl. She doesn't like the color brown. It was too dark. Another time you told me it was dirty, and recently you told me you wished I was white. Then I will be white, you said. Why? I replied. I want to be like Mummy, you said before disappearing into another room as if that was that. There was nothing more to say. Your kids are dual heritage, and this is something that you wrestle with throughout the book. I have two little nephews, and they're Irish, Welsh, and Nigerian. And there was a moment when my little nephew came back from nursery one day, and he has the most magnificent epic afro. And he said, I don't like my hair. And then the whole family did about 2 or 3 years of campaigning about how cool it was to have a big afro, but nobody else had one. And I felt that at a really young age, little kids growing up in the West, where perhaps they're not surrounded by brown and black people all of the time, they are getting these concepts super early. How does a 4-year-old say she doesn't like to be brown? How did you analyze that? How did you unpack that, Nikesh?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew where that came from, because those things being internalized for so early on, it really threw me, because there was nothing that was happening in our home that would point her towards that. And it kind of, once your kids are out in the world, once they're going to daycare or nursery, once they're mixing with other kids, or like hearing how other people's parents talk and how that impacts on other children around them, they're absorbing so much information. They're absorbing information at such an exponential rate that our kids grew up essentially wearing what would be traditionally boys' clothes, because they were hand-me-downs from cousins, because clothes and kids grow out of them fast. But as soon as they went to nursery, they decided that they didn't want to wear those clothes because they were for boys. And yet, before going to nursery, they hadn't made that that distinction at all. And that was the same with brownness. And so that's why I'm so adamant that we talk about representation and why representation matters. And I don't necessarily think that representation, like direct representation in what TV or reading books is like the end goal. I don't think it necessarily makes the world a better place, but I do think that having that diverse representation in kids' books, in you know, kids' TV shows, the stuff that kids are absorbing from a very early age. If that is, if that brown kids and kids with visible disabilities, and kids with non-visible disabilities, kids in non-traditional families, girls, and so as the main characters of those stories, like as their stories are centered, then that sends a message not just to my kids but to everyone. I often think that white men, middle class white men in the UK are probably the ones who need representation the most, because were able to suspend their disbelief enough for a world where ghosts need busting, but they wouldn't suspend their disbelief enough for the thought that 4 women could bust ghosts when Ghostbusters came out, and they took all of their ire out on Leslie Jones, and for me that just tells you who needs this diverse representation and what age they need it as well. And for so my daughter isn't internalizing these things from before she's even gone to school.
There is something that I love about what you're doing with your little ones. We showed a picture from your Instagram feed of your little girls, in that you've researched, like, how do I be the best dad I can be? And somewhere where you go for your research is the Good Men Project. So I'm going to show it here. 25 fail-safe rules for dads raising daughters. So you went through this list. There's a list of 25 things. And you share them in your memoir. And then you came up with an alternative. I'm not so sure this is a great list. You came up with an alternative, which is also in your memoir. Would you read it as a girl dad, right? A dad of 2 girls, a very special kind of guy. Read out your advice for parents if they choose to take it. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Just to kind of give you a caveat, this is a chapter where I'm kind of exploring what it is to be a dad raising daughters, and the things that I should be thinking about, and I did a lot of reading about how dad should be raising daughters, and what occurred to me was actually the listening told me more about how we should be raising boys than how we should be raising girls, and so I kind of and so I thought, how should I be? How should one be? The more I think about it, I'm left increasingly with my own version of this list. Don't shame your daughter for the way she dresses, acts, or the body she is in. Tell her she is perfect just the way she is, and beautiful and smart and funny and everything else she is. Raise her in love, not shame, about the way she looks or feels, and never pin any of it on her being a girl. So yeah,
you share your little ones with us, not directly, but you kind of share their thinking, their stories. I'm going to show some pictures here because it's really beautiful, and they are shaping you to become, I'm going to say, a feminist ally. There were things that you didn't realize about women that women had to do and handle that you now get because you've got little girls. And there was a moment, and I love this, a family situation, and you call people in the family situation villains because why? What was going on that you realize, this is what it means to be a little girl? Tell us the story.
Yeah, so it was mostly around cuddles, and 2 people demanding cuddles off my daughter and her not wanting to cuddle, and the male in the situation used some language that basically sounded very aggressive and misogynistic, and in that moment I was like, oh my god, I see how language, like casual language, can be so sexist and so abusive towards women, and make them feel a certain way about their bodies. And I write about this quite honestly in the book. I texted 2 of my female friends. I was like, oh my god, guys, I get it now. I get what you've been saying. I've just witnessed this thing. And they were like, yeah, well done. Like, we're so daughters in order to treat us like human beings. And the reason I put it in the book is because regardless of what social issue we believe in, for white people who want to get involved in anti-racism work, for men who want to be a feminist ally, for those of us who are heteronormative, who want to stand up for our LGBTQIA plus community, for those of us who are middle class, who want to ensure that we're not taking up space of working class people, for all of us, there are points in those conversations where we will hang back because we feel uncomfortable, we don't want to get something wrong, and actually we should wrong and be okay with being uncomfortable. And I was uncomfortable with my friends basically making fun of me for demanding demanding the proverbial cookie for them, but by putting it in the book, I kind of showed that it's okay, guys, we're going to be fine. Like, yes, there is a degree to which I understand all this stuff much more like presciently and prominently because I'm seeing it in real time, but it's what I do with that, what I do now that I've witnessed it, that matters, that counts.
Nikesh, I got a thought here from Shortsy100 on YouTube. So Shortsy says, I've never believed racism is natural in any way. We are conditioned to these things and taught them, and these taboos and phobias are handed down from our elders. So he's just adding on to what you were saying about the brown skin and brownness and how you've talked to your youngsters about that. I also want to bring in a comment from Robin Ha, who is a cartoonist, and she experienced racism growing up, and I'm wondering how you protect your children from it. Here's Robin.
I moved to America when I was 14 without really speaking in English. So the first time that I felt like I was a foreigner was the first day of my school in America. There wasn't any ESL classes, so I was basically enrolled in the regular classes with no help in terms of language. I felt unheard and ignored and very insecure. There were definitely some kids who bullied me because I didn't speak any English, and also I did not look white American. But fortunately, I was able to make some friends by going to an afternoon art classes at a local comic book shop.
How did you handle racism as a youngster? People called you names. People called me names growing up in the UK, and that was just part of everyday life. How do you protect your kids from that?
Yeah, I don't know if I handled it the best way when I was growing up. There wasn't really a blueprint. There wasn't really like an instruction manual for how to handle it. A lot of it, especially where I grew up and the school I went to and the environment I was in and how my parents internalized it, was to basically just keep your head down and get on with it. You're better than these people. You have to prove to be better than them. And the thing that I'm really trying with my kids is, instead of centering how they should be about white people or centering how they should be about around the default, I want to center how they should be. That for me, that's much more important. And knowing that they can talk to me about all of these things, and making sure that they are aware of what the world is, but also they feel like they could be anyone, that they could be anything. And if they ever do experience this stuff, I mean, luckily, I saw someone in the comments has referred to me as a race hustler. Thanks, guys. That's exactly what I want to be talking about, is racism. Imagine building a career because you really want to talk about racism and not because it's impacted your life so much that you feel compelled to. I'd much rather be writing comedy fiction, my friend. I'm far from being a race hustler. But the point is, I've got a bank of work that my kids can read or watch and feel like they're not alone, which is what I felt growing up.
Nikesh Shukla, it's been really great talking to you for the past 25 minutes. Have a look here on my laptop. Brown Baby is a memoir of race, family, and home. And there's also an accompanying podcast, and I just want you to hear the theme music. Have a listen to this.
Can you sing a song with the words brown baby in it?
Brown baby with your head on your chicken head.
Irresistible Nikesh Shukla. Thanks for joining us on the stream. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody.